Hi, Commander Runningcloud here. Yeah, I feel pretty silly calling myself Commander Runningcloud. What do you think? Of course I feel silly because I don't have any proof of any of it, do I? No proof of anything. That's what I've got. And I'll tell you, I was really hoping that I would get proof, within a week of last week. And do you want to know what I got? I got an increase in the symptoms from the bioweapons. That's what I got. I got more pain in my cheek where Marcus Smith put the flesh-eating chemicals. And this tooth went wacko again. And the things in my ears seem to be back. So I almost feel like I'm a character in a video game and somebody hit restart and I went back because I really felt like I was getting better. And now I feel like I'm back to getting worse because of the self-replicating quality. And the fact that I like to be optimistic, I really do. I like to believe, that things are going to work out. So that's what I'm going to continue to do. But don't think I don't have my doubts, and I have doubts just like everybody else, but I'm moving forward. Do you want to know why? Because I have so much reinforcing evidence, so much evidence to believe that there are good ETs, and there is a Star Trek, and there is a career option for me there. Because, if I have to live suffering this torture of death, living, in this horrible concentration camp, I could hardly sleep last night because people were just hanging right outside my door. There's plenty of other places to be, but they hang right outside my door, and I've already, had people trying to break in. And then the crazy man, he was just outside my window, and people hack my phone. I can see it flickering and flashing, and they hack my computer. I see it bobbing and weaving, and I just have no sense of personal security. And I think I was a little more paranoid last night because I was directly talking to, through cyberspace, I was directly communicating with news services in Africa and trying to warn them about what's happening to the American heiresses like me, how we end up being bioweapon guinea pigs, and how we end up with all of our property, our inheritances that we're counting on for our old age, all of it stolen. All my property, all my inheritance stolen from me by Andre Martin Petty, my own half brother. So today I finally thought, well, let me call some relatives. I got some relatives that are doing pretty well, and they might have some rental properties where I can live in a better place. And do you want to know what I found out? I found out that my relatives are also getting robbed by their siblings instead of being able to get their inheritances. So you might ask yourself, well, what are the courts doing to protect heirs and heiresses? Well, I'll tell you what the courts are doing. They're complying. The probate lawyers are working with the thieves. They're stealing themselves. I can't get them to change the title on my land in Wewoka. They're in Seminole County, Wewoka, Oklahoma. And I tried to call the Cook County Court to find out if my brother had really filed the will in probate. And you got to wait for a call back. You got to leave a message and wait for a call back. And the place I could get through to, he had no record of anything. But I talked to the greatest people there in Logan County, Oklahoma, about some land my mother left to me there. And they have no record of this land going through probate, no record at all. So I'm feeling really scared because a lot of Americans depend on inheritances, especially if they had a career, like mine, if they had a life like mine. My inheritance is the only way that I can survive. And when I was expressing fear to my mom that, Mom, I'm old and I, have been blacklisted by the Ivy League and they're not going to let me get my PhD. And even if I got it, they're not going to give me a job teaching. And she said, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. You'll be taken care of. I have plenty of money. So she left me a share of her multi-million-dollar estate. And my stepfather had a trust for me too. He made so much money that he got a trust for his 2 kids, me and my sister. He got a trust for us all because it was a way for him to manage his humongous income. Neurosurgeon? Give me a break. Since 1971 or 2, and all this time he's been accumulating property. Why, when I went to Bullhead City in McLaughlin, Arizona, where he invested, they followed me all around the town to see what I'd find out. They followed me everywhere I went. And I went to the office building he built. Empty, empty, empty. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Empty, empty, empty. Because he created a spinal institute there in Bullhead City, Arizona. But they're not going to give me my land. When I went to my land for Oklahoma, they were already putting forgeries in the Wewoka County land records. And the European woman who worked there, when I asked her to make copies of all the pages that I'd made copies of, she did not make the copies. She took the originals that I had of the pages and she just threw them away. She gave me a bunch of junk. Just like, how you see on TV, they'll take a few dollars and then put a lot of blank paper in. That's what she gave me. She gave me a couple of pages on the outside and then nothing but blank pages. And then the next thing I know, I come in there and I find a European woman named Joanne Deck from New York City, who isn't even in my family, is the only person that they put in the records. So the scams against heirs are not just from greedy, immoral relatives, brothers and sisters, ex-wives, stepchildren. It's also from the judicial system. And it seems to me that we Americans, as we vote for these judges, we really should have more guarantees that our judges are going to make sure that we get our inheritances. I've heard of trust funds that are older than the Magna Carta, whatever that is, that are respected. I was talking to one of my cousins today, and we were talking about it. And she was saying, you've got to fight for your property. You've got to fight for your land. It's yours. You've got to fight for it. And I told her, I said, those papers are only as good as the people that administer it. The law is only as good as the people that represent the court. And if you've got a lot of crooks representing your court, you're going to have a lot of crookery. And we've got a lot of crooks in our courts. And they are robbing the heirs and heiresses of America. And here I am in this concentration camp where lowlives like Marcus and Kedra Smith can actually deform me, attack me, and deform my freaking face. You can see the shadows coming back because whatever it is that I'm infected with, it's not going to be beaten. It just will not get back. It's just very depressing, very depressing, very depressing. But I'm going to give you a spoiler alert from this point forward about a show on Netflix. Let me look and see what the exact name of it is. There's a show on Netflix that I'm going to refer to today in my talk about elitism, because I found a lot of Korean on Netflix are dealing with this issue. I don't know if you saw, what was that one called with the big doll? Squad games. Oh golly. I usually know what it is when I want to talk about it. Squid Games. That's what it was called. Squid Games. I know you saw that, and that sort of had a moral to it. Wouldn't you say that it had a moral to it, that show? And then I saw, the movie Kingsland, which was a wonderful romance, but it had an entire subtext based on the topic of today. And then this movie I saw, it was called The Eight. I'm looking for it here, and I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it here. But I think it was called The Eight. There it is. The Eight Show. The Eight Show. Okay? So, if you have not seen The Eight Show and you don't want me to spoil it by talking about it, then just tune out now, because I'm going to talk about The Eight Show as a part of my conversation about elitism and the value of elitism. Now, I am still going to be acting as if the good ETs are in my audience and they're learning about how difficult it is on this planet for good people. Like I told you, I'm a little bit, nervous because I was talking to Africa, and I was actually trying to tell the African journalists the dirty games that are going on here. You might look at rap music and look, at Michael Jackson or something when he was here, or look at Prince, or look at, the basketball players that are really famous. And you might think that American life is really good for Black people here if you've got a talent or something. But the truth of it is that at the turn of the century, at least 50% of the people in the South were Black Americans. And that's not even counting the American Indians that were living in the South. And of course, we were on the land. And of course, we were working the land. We were growing crops, raising animals, racing cars, raising horses, raising dogs, doing artisan work with wrought iron. We were doing all kinds of things, and then we had places to eat. We had juke joints for, serving gin and dancing. There was an entire economy built. A lot of people try to say, well, it was slavery, but slavery wasn't what you think it was. If you go to Williamsburg, Virginia, and see how vast it is and how much land it is, you'll come to a different kind of understanding of slavery. If you can read John Blassigane's collections of slave narratives, you'll find that a lot of people who were considered slaves by the Work Progress Administration, that was a social welfare employment folklore collection group that came out of the Civil War during Reconstruction. If you look through the slave narratives, you'll find out that a lot of Americans that are Black had no idea that there was even such a thing as slavery. Some of them hadn't even seen a European person in their life. They were trying to remember back to when they saw a European. Plantations were not everywhere. Slavery was not everywhere. They kind of wrap that history around us, just like people are going to totally forget that before cyberspace started robbing them, every minute they had was commodifiable for themselves. You could work for yourself. If you were creating art or literature, you could actually sell it. It didn't become a part of social media and then a part of a blockchain and then a part of an economy that you don't even know about. That didn't happen. People had a lot more opportunities to control the fruits of their labor. We didn't know anything about Marxism, in which the leading ruling class, there is such a thing as a ruling class in the first place, which is elitism, and that the ruling class is striving to own the fruits of the labor of the people they call peasants and serfs, who later became what? Employees. But if you just look at what they're doing in terms of destroying the records of land ownership, for me personally, you can see that idea of owning the land, those European political systems, fascism, Marxism, capitalism, socialism, they've all been deployed against the American economy, an economy that was self-sufficient and growing. So I'm looking over at Africa and I'm seeing a lot of Chinese people starting businesses there because they can afford it. They haven't been a part of the colonialization process. And I see a lot of European corporations selling them old technology that they're going to have to dig up the lands to bury it under the lands, which means that the European corporations are going to have access to all that underground land, just like they have my land in Oklahoma in particular. So I guess I'm just trying to warn the people of Africa from what the African Americans have seen about the way this land takeover process works and how in the end stages of the game, they will just knock you aside and take it from you and throw you in a concentration camp and test the weapons of the future on you so that you've got organisms living in your face and your head, jumping in your legs and your hips, maybe even living in your belly. There might not be anything sacred about my big old belly. This big old belly might just be a bioweapon. Look at it. Look at it. My belly was kind of flat. And look at this tooth sticking out like that. I had a beautiful smile, but not anymore. You know, taking away a person's beauty is an act of war. But let's talk about the value of elitism. If you see that movie, The 8 Show, you would see an allegory about a class system. And I thought that was very interesting, and it kind of inspired me to do this talk on the value of elitism. Because I'll be honest with you, after I just got worse, after I was expecting some kind of relief and I just got worse, it really took a bite out of me. It really took something out of me. It really made me feel hopeless. It made me feel like, Silver Rain, you better put your feet on the ground and quit imagining science fiction futures. You better put your feet on the ground and start planning to live here. And that was when I called my cousins, to see, hey, you know any place I can get a safe rental? And they're like, we're being robbed of our inheritances too. And I'm just thinking how systematically real Americans are being deprived of their properties. I mean, I'm already 67. I'm not going to live forever. And I'm living here where every day I almost have a freaking heart attack from the stress because I'm living with the lowest class of people. I got a crazy man, an old crazy man, who might be the one who cut open my door because he hangs around my door all the time. This afternoon, I'm on the phone. He's hanging outside my window. Hacking my phone? Do I know? I couldn't find my purse. I almost had a freaking heart attack, thinking, oh my God, when I opened the door, did they somehow sneak in? And then last night, 4:00 in the morning, I got 4 people right outside my door. We're going to break in? You see, I don't know, but I'll tell you this. When I'm living with the affluent people in Woodbridge, Connecticut, Juan Hernandez broke in and moved in. So there's no safety anywhere. And I just have to ask myself, why do we have law enforcement when law enforcement works against the people? And that, my friends, is very European. European law was designed to protect the royals. European law enforcement was designed to protect property. But we in America, we thought we were electing law, judiciary people that were going to protect the people. And we've just been so fooled. And that's why I feel it's so important to tell people in Africa, be careful who you let invest in your land. Be careful about legislating for foreign investments. And don't listen to the stereotypes about Black people being lazy or stupid or irresponsible. We're being robbed and victimized. We're being forced into concentration camps they call ghettos. We didn't even have the word ghetto until the World War II. And then we had ghettos and slums. But before that, we had farms. Okay? I mean, I can't speak for every family in pre-Civil War America, in pre-World War I America, pre-World War II America, but my family was owning land. And as I understand it, they called some of our properties plantations. But as I understand it, my people never acted like plantation owners, even when they had people working on their land. You know, in Oklahoma, we had sharecroppers, I hear. But what is sharecropping other than another way to pay rent? It's paying rent without using fiat cash. It's exchanging goods for access to property. That's an economic system, my friends. Well, elitism is my topic. Not just because of the South Korean film, because communicating with real living newsmakers in Africa made me think about all of the stereotypes of African leaders that I've heard until the recent group that come through on cyberspace. What the news in America taught us about the leaders of Africa was that they were all elitists and they were all corrupt and they were all taking European dollars to betray their own people and steal all the stuff and let the Europeans control the stuff. That's the story we got here in America about the Africans. So when I'm trying to tell the African people, be careful, don't buy all that old telecommunications stuff. They're using satellites. If you buy all their old inventory, you are giving them access to your underground land. They're going to test for minerals and they're going to rob you and then they're going to kill you and steal your land because that's what they did to me and my family. There's hardly any of us left because of the economic system that has made childbirth too expensive and that has made us die young and made us not have any access to the wealth We can't even travel. You know how many Europeans can go on vacation? I don't know many Black Americans that can actually afford to go on vacation. So how do you go from being 50% of the population to being 13% in poverty? How do you go from being 50% of the land occupying hard-working population to 13% of poverty? Well, you get there by design. You get there when people plan for you to get there. They plan for attrition. And in their plan, don't you think they broke the border to bring all those newcomers in? People that don't have the standards that Americans have about the way they live? People that have lived in different places that do not have the access America has? People that will be so happy to be here and get themselves an iPhone and a Pixel phone and get flawless service. They're not going to know about the hackers. They might not even speak the language. So I'm looking at the people in Africa, and I'm looking at them recovering from European investors, recovering from post-colonialism, recovering from colonialism. And I'm trying to say to them, get the patents and study them. Develop your own technology. Do it from scratch. Or they're going to sell you their old crap with maintenance contracts that give them permission to dig up your land, seize your land, control your people for generations until they just wipe you out. Well, after I'm giving those messages and then my disease gets worse, I feel like, oh my God, every day that I'm alive and fighting for humanity is a day that I get closer to being rubbed out by my environment. And that, my friends, was only made about 1,000,000,000, billion, trillion, gazillion times worse when I watched the 8 show. Because the 8 show was so much a parable, an allegory of the life the Europeans in America have me, an American heiress, living, that I almost didn't get out of bed today. I really didn't. And I might not even be broadcasting now if it wasn't for the storms that we're expecting. You see, it's only 4:16 here, but I wanted to beat the storms in case we lose our electricity. You see the disease working through my face? I do. I can see it. And where's the relief? You know, I try to pretend the extraterrestrials, the good ones, are watching out for me and healing me and curing me, but there's a good possibility that what we see is what we get. And this is it. So I try to make plans to get out of here, but all my relatives are as burdened as I am with trying to survive. They're having as hard a time as I'm having. So you tell me how people all the way in Europe where they don't have any natural assets, how come they are living on the beaches in Hawaii, in the Caribbean, in the Carolinas, and I'm living here? How did that happen? How did all my people end up with debt instead of economic prosperity? You know? And then we're told that, well, let's invest, invest in stocks and bonds. But there are only 2 problems with that. One, when you invest in stocks and bonds, if you're poor, chances are you're going to need that money because those corporations paying the dividends, they're charging you more so they can pay those dividends. Where do you think dividend money comes from? It comes from your pocket. So they'll say, oh, you can get money for free. Just invest and have a long-term mentality about your investments. But at the same time, the corporations are making decisions that their costs rise faster than your wages rise, and you're not going to get your inheritances. So where does that lead? Where does that lead? I mean, where do you end up when you have no food or shelter? I'm just asking you. And now I'm going to ask you that when you elect your representatives, when you vote for all those judges, when you vote for your state representatives, when you vote for your governors, when you vote for your senators, your House of Representatives, for your state, when you vote for your federal senators, your federal House of Representatives, when you vote for your governors, did I say that already? When you vote for your president, don't you think that you're participating in a democracy? And that in a democracy, your life has equal weight to the representatives, to the CEOs, to the people that are claiming ownership of all the public properties? You think you're equal until you need a representative to fight for you. And then you find out you have no standing in their courts. Then you find out that the probate lawyers are too busy robbing you to represent you. And you don't have enough money to get them to do the work for you. And guess what? It's designed to be that way. It's designed to create a system of class. Ouch, my tooth. It's designed to create elitism. Well, you can look up definitions of elite, but I'll just tell you what I think it means. When you are elite, it means that you are better than everybody else. It means that because you're better than everybody else, you're entitled to the biggest piece of chicken. You're entitled to the best style of living because you're the best. And your whole life has to reflect that bestness about you. And you can't be the best unless there's a worst. So you have to be able to look down on groups of people and say, well, they're the worst. They're the worst people in the world. They're the ones that don't get no stuff. They're the ones that don't get fair representation. They're the ones that we make our profits from. So when you invest, the only people that can hold on to a position in the market are people that have money to spend, money to burn. So while it sounds really good to hear somebody say, well, put your money here, ride it up and down, and in 10 years, you'll have some money. You'll have some real cash to work with. Well, here's the thing about it. I had investments, but then I had a kid going to college. So I had to cash in. And guess what? The market dipped at exactly the time that the tuition was due. Almost as if by a system. Almost as if the big buyers that can actually control the pump and dump, almost as if they knew when the poor players would be most vulnerable. So let's say you're part of a real estate association and you also like to invest, and you happen to know that every real estate association in the country is run by your people, and they've all decided 10% no less. Everybody across the board, every real estate association advise your members to raise those rents by 10%. And let's say that you're a banker and you know that you're going to make the mortgages go up. And you also are part of the real estate association. Huh? then you would know exactly when to pump and dump your stocks. You would know exactly when the poor people would have to sell so they could live, because they needed money just that much. So that was the first time I invested. Was my mother gave me stock, and that company went out of business and cashed out all the stocks. The next time I invested was my university stopped paying Social Security for the graduate student teachers and all the employees. This is when, was his name Bucky White? Some major league criminal had a brother who was the head of the University of Massachusetts system. Was his name Bucky White? I don't remember the name of the guy, but his brother got prosecuted. But the brother, the good brother that ran the University of Massachusetts university system, he sold all of our retirement to private investment. So when I left the university, they just cashed me out. When I left Illinois Bell, they cashed me out of my trust fund. They just cashed me out of my retirement benefits. And it was funny when they were firing me, they said, you know, you're going to lose all your retirement benefits. But I was in my 20s then, and I knew I was going to be a success. And I did. When I started my own consulting company, I made more money than any of them. But then the Europeans, using the Moynihan bill, decided that third-party contracts were out, and the major corporations would only do business with European consulting companies that would then sell the contracts to third parties, which is where my business was at. And then they started with the H-1 visas, where they let West Indians in who were very well educated, who had enough money to be upper class from their own economy in their own country, where the Europeans do not possess the economic power and their imperialism. And they just installed a whole level of East Indians right over our heads. So I ended up working for a guy named Chad Ved, who told me how much he admires poor people's love for their families, because he had heard through the media that broadcasted the public image of my people, he heard we were all poor. I wasn't poor then, but I am now. So, is that predictive programming? Or is that a system that's designed to make all of the real Americans poor? And they can spot us just by looking at us anywhere in the world. They know, oh, Black, Indian American, Black Native American, you're poor. You're probably a criminal. Can you rap? Can you shake your behind? Can you twerk? Because y'all are known for that. But I went to Northwestern University. I became a computer programmer and systems analyst and created my own business, Crystal Data Systems LLC. And then I had children, and I was like a fantastic mom, volunteering, creating organizations, community-based, doing my civic duty. And after that, and during that, I go to Yale to get a degree in African American studies so that I can defy the public media that taught Chad Ved, which he was trying to make his name short so that we Americans wouldn't have to struggle with all those syllables. So that Chad Ved could come to America, get a job better than mine, and say how much he admires the love that poor people have for their families. It's pretty humiliating, right? So how did that story about me get out? How come they didn't know, about my success story? Well, the same reason they don't know my success story now. Yeah, I created my own computer services company. I even had a person I was going to bring in with me. He'd agreed to come in with me when we got the contracts. But then I got pregnant. God's will, I got pregnant miraculously. I got pregnant. And then I got pregnant again. And by the time I got pregnant with my second baby, I said, hey, I'm not going to let strangers influence my children's development. No, 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 not me. I'm going to give my children the very best home experience, and the very best is me. And when I did the math, it wasn't that much of a sacrifice. It just didn't bring enough, revenue in. We could have used more money. So I guess that Illinois Bell money came in handy because I needed it to live on. Well, how many other Americans have dipped into their retirement accounts so that they could pay for some kid's college or cover an emergency expense or cover medical bills that they thought would be covered by insurance? But guess what happened? Guess what happened in the 1990s? In the 1990s, corporations said, well, we're not going to pay for health insurance anymore. We'd rather pay dividends. And when you get the coverage, it's not going to be as good as it used to be because we want your fresh new cash. So if you want to get better, you better come up with some money. Now, in the olden days, when the doctors used to come to your house with a little black bag and they owned their own business, the doctor himself could decide on his prices. He could decide when it's a charity case. He could decide to use his skills to help people. Now, if a doctor uses his skills to help people, he can be sued under Good Samaritan laws. They made it illegal and high risk for doctors to help people. And then they brought the HMOs in after they trained a lot of people in graduate school to get Masters of Business Administration. They had to have something to do, so they learned to monetize the doctor's profession and force the doctors to become employees instead of entrepreneurs. And the impact on health management was a hit on compassion. That's what I'm telling you. I'm telling you that with the concept of class and elitism comes a loss of the human values of compassion, empathy. You no longer care to help people that are suffering by creating new products, new levels of the economy to support them, because now you can feel special and important as you walk over their corpses on the street. You can feel like, oh, thank God it's not me. Everybody can be Marie Antoinette now. Let them eat cake if the peasants are starving. Let them eat cake, I said. Well, I have been a very interesting specimen because when you look at me on paper, you would think that I'm with them, that I'm an elite. But that isn't the case for me. That isn't who I am at all. And I think that when they let me into Yale, despite my altruistic visions, they still didn't know if I was going to flesh out on the side of the people or the people that want to own the global economy. And when they found out who I am and how supportive I am of everybody, well, they really came after me, didn't they? They really came after me so relentlessly that here's where I am in my old age. I'm here. Meanwhile, people that did not work themselves to the point where they could get admitted to the most prestigious institutions in the country for education, well, if they were ready to betray the people, they were able to prosper. they were able to lie and cheat and steal and con, then they got rewarded mightily. You see? And that is the story that you'll see in the 8 show. And I couldn't watch all of it because some of it was just a little too graphic, especially with the torture, the physical torture that my enemies have me under with their bioweapons testing. And here's another, thing I'm trying to warn Africa. That if they've got Starlink and they start to put 5G and they really addict you to their technology like their iPhones, and if you start looking to them for your medical technology and your machines, you're going to find yourself victims of the same bioweapon technology that I am. They'll be sending all of those bioweapons being manufactured in the Ukraine over to Africa, so that you won't be able to think for yourself because you'll have a worm in your brain. Well, I think that's the objective for this. I think the objective of this disease is to take control of my body. But I didn't get the jab, I didn't get the jab. I knew better from my past. And having lived the life of a targeted individual infected with Morgellons when I left Yale University of Massachusetts, I knew what my enemies are capable of. But I still can't get over the fact that Charles Lieber of Harvard University was also full-time faculty in biotechnology, nanotechnology, biochemical nanotechnology at Wuhan, where they say the virus began. So I guess what I'm trying to warn people that are not in as deep with Europeans as we are in America, I guess I'm trying to warn them what their enemies are capable of, and I'm trying to convince them these are your enemies. Do you know I had best friends in Canada that totally dissed me in America while they're living it up as the elite, having gigantic, lavish weddings for their many, many, many children? Well, I can barely get by. I can barely survive, and it's the same for everybody in my family. So, elitism is about ego. Okay? And elitism has inherent values for unfair competition. Cheating, conning, stealing, tricking, robbing are all ways that you can become and maintain your quality of being an elite. Also on Netflix, I saw a show, I think it was called The Gentleman. And Guy Ritchie, Madonna's husband, created this show. And at one point in the show, the hero, the leading man, says of his royal status, he's a lord, he says, we live in a zoo, but we hunt in the jungle. I remember that line. I hardly remember any lines from movies, ever. But that line rang so true and so relevant, it just stuck in my head. The elites live in the zoo. We're all watching them. But they hunt in the jungle, and you are the prey.